welcome to another episode of Gov Tech Today, where we aim to bridge .com and .gov. I'm your host, Jen Saha. Today I'm super excited. We have an awesome guest in the studio with me, Sushil Srinivasan. I will only be saying your last name one time so as to avoid butchering it. But Sushil, you work in AI, but AI infrastructure, which is sort of the underlying foundation of AI across the industry. Tell us a little bit about Keysight and what you're working on over there.
Sure. Again, thanks, Jen. Thanks for having me over. And yes, I'm Sushil Srinivasan. So I'm Director of Products and Business Development with Keysight. And my focus is primarily on how AI infrastructure can be tested and validated. So one of Keysight's primary objectives is they are the pioneers of testing and development for AI infrastructures. So what we do is basically we have products, which I have software and hardware products that are mostly for training as well as for inferencing. So AI, as in, if you think about an AI infrastructure, it can be divided into two components. One is the AI training, another one is AI inferencing. So we have products for both testing, testing infrastructures as well as testing. I'm sorry. So basically, it's for testing training infrastructures as well as for training testing inference infrastructures.
So AI is driving a ton of investment into the infrastructure side of operations. From your perspective, what are sort of the biggest trends shaping this investment in the market today?
So if you think about AI, the primary challenges that we've seen so far is the rare commodity, basically GPUs not easily being available. That's primarily one of the biggest challenges that we're seeing right now.
Everyone talks about GPUs. It's like the buzzword of the day when it comes to AI.
But GPU, if you think about it, is like a high performance car engine. Now, an engine can really perform well, but then there are a whole system around it which needs to work with those high performing engines so that the car efficiently performs as per requirements. So think about a cooling system. Think about the pipeline that brings the gas into the engine. So all those things need to perform well for your engine to perform efficiently. The same thing when you think about an AI infrastructure, you have a high performing GPU, which is similar to a car engine. Now, there's a whole lot of things that work around it. Think about the cooling systems. Think about the power that needs to be supplied to that. Think about the network that needs to bring these packets to those GPUs so that they can perform efficiently. All these things need to work together. The biggest problem is the GPU is there, but all these other things need to catch up to see how the GPU can efficiently perform when in comparison to the rest of the infrastructure.
So I think maybe, in my observation at least, the rest of that infrastructure, the cooling, the networking, the storage, all of that kind of doesn't get talked about quite as much.
That is correct. That's assumed that everything is going to be performing well because the focus is completely on the GPUs right now. But now the industry is catching up. People are understanding that just having GPUs alone is not going to solve the problem. You need to have the entire AI infrastructure running according to make sure that the GPUs are performing well.
So does this cause like a bottleneck when this happens? Is that what you guys are seeing across the industry right now?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So we work very closely with a lot of hyperscalers, pretty much all the hyperscalers. We work very closely with them. And what we've observed so far is these high commodity GPUs are sitting nearly 50% idle because they are waiting for the data to come to them so that they can actually perform their calculations and make sure that the language models are built correctly. So 50% of the time, if your GPUs are sitting idle, basically, which means that your ROI on the investment is only 50%. And even though they get the information after waiting for 50% of the time, there is still a lot of errors which compensates for, which basically reduces the time when your language models are being built. It's not accurately being built, which means that there's going to be a lot of retransmissions happening and a lot of congestions happening. So what we are trying to do as Keysight is basically optimize the AI network. Before the packets hit the GPUs, there is a network fabric which basically brings the packets to the GPUs. What we are trying to say is We build the network fabric correctly so that you maximize the time your GPUs are actually running and you maximize your GPU ROI.
So what kind of factors are you guys seeing and what are you sort of mitigating before these AI clusters go into production?
So typically what we're seeing is there is a lot of congestion. So before going into the congestion part, if you think about how GPUs talk to each other, there is a certain way in which they communicate with each other, what's called collective communications. So there are certain patterns in which they exchange data between themselves. Now, these collective communications need to be optimized. How do you optimize them? So then you go onto the network fabric where you see congestion controls. There are different areas in which you're going to have congestion. If you think about a traditional data center network, what's happening is you have huge volumes of data that's already flowing. If you think about Netflix traffic or YouTube traffic, the data traffic is already increased exponentially. But you don't see the traditional problems that are being highlighted, what you see in the AI data centers today. The reason being, even though the traffic patterns are pretty chaotic in a regular data center, it's much more predictable. You can say that there is a certain way in which these traffic patterns are going to be flowing so that you can move forward and you can optimize your network to get the data working together. But in case of AI data center, it's completely different because it's pretty much the same kind of data that's being exchanged between these GPUs. Now, what happens in that case is your traditional networking constructs like load balancing, congestion controls, all those things go for a toss. Now, we need to come up with a different paradigm to see how your network can be optimized for AI traffic. That's what we're trying to see. What we're trying to solve is how efficiently you can build your network fabric even before you deploy your GPUs. So your fabric is optimized. So when you deploy your GPUs, you know for sure that they're going to give you good results.
So you mentioned you guys are already working with many of the large hyperscalers. Our focus at Gov Tech Today is Gov. And what are you doing? Give me some insights into how Keysight and this sort of optimization is being adopted in government.
So there is a new sovereign cloud which is coming up right now. Mm-hmm. We have these AI factories, we have sovereign clouds which are coming up. The primary objective is some of these data are so sensitive that it should not be leaving a certain perimeter, geographical perimeter. Yep. It's being done in different countries. It's being done in different organizations here. For example, the California government, some of the sensitive data that they have, they do not want it to leave the California perimeter itself.
Yep.
So that is an area which we are trying to focus to see how we can help some of these AI sovereign cloud companies before actually they deploy their AI infrastructure. How can Keysight as a company come in and help them optimize that?
So I think we are seeing some traction, certainly more than ever, in investment in digital transformations, AI, these sovereign clouds or closed systems in California and beyond. Are you seeing these departments and agencies sort of recognize the importance of what Keysight is pitching?
Oh yeah. We already see that there is a lot of, like if you think about the way AI is being deployed in government agencies today, I can give you an example of how DMVs are already moving forward with AI. Basically, if you think about the way they are moving into e-licensing right now. So you can actually have a license right in your phone. You don't need to have a physical license anymore. Most of them are already adopting to that. And facial recognitions, the way in which DMVs are currently using that's a way in which AI is actually powering it. And traffic controls, that's another area where edge AI is actually supporting this. Now, how Keysight kind of plays a role in all these things is we can validate and we can test all these silos and make sure that the overall end-to-end system, the whole ecosystem works perfectly.
Yep.
That's where we are here to help.
So give me some advice. If I'm a California government leader, I'm a department director, a CIO, how should we, as we're planning these infrastructure investments and these AI deployments, how should we look at these investments over the next few years? And what would sort of be your advice to me?
So typical AI investments, it's pretty expensive. Number one, the GPUs are expensive. Number two, the infrastructure building itself is expensive. So typical deployments work in the way we call it as pods. So you build a smaller prototype of it and you validate that prototype. You make sure that everything works fine in that prototype and you start scaling it. Now, when you start scaling it, that's where your network is going to come into play.
Yep.
So that's where we pitch in, is to make sure that the entire network portfolio works correctly before the overall deployment goes into play. Now, if you think about how the speeds have exponentially increased, so we've seen a 10 to 100 gig on the Ethernet side. It took a long time for it to come up. Then the 100 to 400 has been relatively small. Now we are already seeing 400 to 800 deployments happening in a lot of service providers. Then you have 1.6T, which is the next trend. All the hyperscalers already doing it. Service providers are already adopting it. Now we are already talking about 3.2T, which is the next generation. Now it's already like, you can see that the adoption has grown up exponentially. And this is where Keysight as a company can come in. And what we actually can do is make sure that the interconnects that are not just connecting the networks within one data center, but across data centers. How do you validate that? How do you make sure that the data transfers are happening correctly? Those are areas in which Keysight is the leader in that.
Yep, I think definitely. Well, and frankly, one of the only that I've seen out there that sort of does this type of work. I think a lot of times we get lost in, it just works. And I just go on and I click and everything works perfectly. But we sort of forget about all the infrastructure underlying that's working together, hopefully in unison, to make it happen. Well, this has been super insightful for me. I want to hit on a couple more things. Sort of the direction that AI infrastructure is heading in the next few years. There's a lot of politics involved, we're banning data centers all over the place, usually for like unfounded reasons, or there's all kinds of controversy. It's become a political issue, really. But where do you see AI infrastructure going in the next 3 to 5 years?
There is going to be a boom in the AI infrastructure industry for sure. That's a given. It's more going to be how AI is being adopted for a consumer to use. Today, there is a wide perception that a lot of these AI deployments are actually not really helping the end customer. And it's having a reversal effect where they are going back and reanalyzing. Some of these enterprises are kind of reanalyzing how this is going to really impact their revenue, because is it really helping their customers? Now, once the end customer knows how actually to utilize this AI, how to use this AI, the boom is going to start.
Yep.
So we saw this in the previous .com boom, where there were so many of these .com companies that were coming in. We see something very similar right now, but we know that the internet has changed the way humanity operates right now. That's what I see, where AI is going to really change the way things are going to work and things are going to be adopted. So definitely there is going to be a huge boom in AI. But coming back to the politics aspect of it, now the primary reason why we see this is because of the power consumption. There's a huge volumes of power that's being consumed by these AI companies, AI factories right now. And these AI data centers being in proximity to neighborhoods, etc. Those are kind of the problems that we are facing. But my perception is overall, with technology changing, I think these things are definitely going to improve, and we're going to see a lot more changes in that happening for sure. From an environment perspective, yes, maybe going nuclear power for those AI data centers, that's already being discussed right now.
Yep.
Because there's so much of volumes of power that is really required. We definitely need to adopt newer technology.
Sure, there's definitely going to be some mitigating factors that have to come into play, but the evolution of technology and frankly using AI to evolve that technology even more quickly, I think paints a promising picture sort of for the future of this. And you're totally right. I think when you relate it back to like, how does this impact me in my daily life? Even some things we forget, right? Like when you're talking about departments of motor vehicles and that digital ID that I have on my phone and how AI is the driver behind that.
Yes.
It's just sort of connecting those dots for people, I think makes it a lot more feasible and a lot more acceptable in like a day-to-day life.
Yep. So now you're already seeing driverless cars coming in. Now, as you said, the digital ID. So earlier we used to have our physical licenses, then we had to have a copy of the registration, then you have to have a copy of your insurance. Everything had to be in paper, but now it's all digitized. It's just on your phone.
Yep.
Everything is there in one phone, and everything, and your phone itself has AI built into it. So everything is changing right now. It's just the way people adopt to it. That's what is important, I believe.
So let me ask you then, this might be like a bit of a spicy question, because I feel like government isn't always the best at sort of keeping up with this. And right now we have a procurement process, but then a procurement process, if it includes AI, which to me, we're talking about how a convergence of this, where everything is going to include AI. So I think that sort of the governance around it, the pipes, the systems that feed into it are all going to have to check yes on that box at some point.
It is true, because AI is learning as we are learning about what to do with AI.
Yep.
So there are a lot of areas in which AI definitely has to improve. So we know there's this term called hallucination. So AI does not really give you the correct answer the first time. So maybe it has to go through multiple iterations before it can actually narrow down to the right answer. Now, is that going to continue? Probably not, because AI is learning as well. The more we learn about it, AI is learning about itself too. So definitely there's going to be a lot more changes in that area. So the dependency on AI is definitely going to increase, and the adoption of AI also is definitely going to increase from that factor.
I think we're hitting on something. When you look at the infrastructure behind AI, that is really meaningful to a lot of policymakers, and that's governance and trust in our AI systems that we're using.
Correct.
Tell me a little bit about how Keysight and these types of testing and monitoring systems sort of go towards addressing those concerns.
Definitely. So one of the areas where Keysight is also focusing on is basically validating, testing some of these things. Now, especially with AI into the picture, it opens up a lot more vulnerabilities. So there's a lot more things that can be ingested as part of your pipeline itself. If you think about a development cycle, if you think about a deployment cycle, there is a whole pipeline, there's a whole workflow which is there. So there are a lot of areas where the attack vectors can be exposed much easily. For example, you're pulling some code from open source code from GitHub. Now that can have any sort of a vulnerability. We've seen multiple
all
of
over
these,
the place problems with that, right?
Exactly. So now we've seen there has been exposures where companies have actually pulled in open source GitHub resources to build their language models, which comes embedded with problems.
Yep.
Now, did AI introduce that? As part of this pipeline, it did, but can AI fix that? Yes, it definitely can. So there are different solutions which we are trying to provide, where you can identify like what is this bill of materials that are getting into your software, right? So it can list you what are all the pipeline areas which could be infected.
Yep.
So those are some of the things which we can highlight as Keysight, which we are capable of doing.
Yep.
Then another thing which we do is, just like how you deploy, before you deploy your GPUs, you can test and validate your network. What we can also do is, before you deploy your security constructs, we have tools and solutions which actually can go in and make sure that your validation is correct. Like you have a firewall, you can have maybe a load balancer. How do you know those things are working appropriately? So we do have solutions where we can actually completely test it. You can stress test it. We have millions of concurrent user applications that can be simulated before you actually put it into your production, where actual users are going to be using it. So
and I don't think people are doing that testing today.
They are to a certain extent, but it does happen in the private sector. That it does happen a little bit, but on the government side, no, I don't see as much yet.
I don't either, and that's kind of terrifying to me. Like, if we're going to test this stuff, I want it to be in government. Frankly, I want it to be in government first before the private sector. But yeah, I agree. I've looked into some of your solutions, and I'm like, guys, I don't think people are doing this today. And frankly, it's like such a no-brainer to me as you're looking at governance and trusting these systems that, yes, everybody should be doing these things.
So most of the onus on whether it's working properly or not is on the product, on basically the vendor itself. The vendor
Yep.
needs to guarantee that it's working fine. It's basically what you're saying is you're giving the keys to the person who's actually deploying it, which is not actually the appropriate way to.
Right. It's a little terrifying.
Exactly.
Okay.
So
Well,
we
now
do
we've
need-
left with a whole new fear. Awesome.
We do need some third-party validations, and that's where we can come in. And as Keysight, we can definitely help.
I like it. Okay. So my takeaway is test everything. Test it and then test it again. And if you're not testing it right now, let's get a testing strategy going.
Yes, definitely. Yes. We need to have, it's preemptive testing, not just doing a postmortem analysis. Once things have gone wrong, there is no point in going and doing a postmortem analysis and trying to mitigate things after things have happened. Do it preemptive, block things before they actually happen. That's the key. That's the key motto.
That's a great message to conclude on. Sushil, thank you so much for coming in and opening our minds to the entire infrastructure world behind the sexy AI that we all use every day.
Thank you, Jen. Thanks for having me.